Welcome to On Air with Kash. Our guest today stars in the new holiday movie, Merry Xmas, available now on all digital platforms. Please welcome Vanessa Angel.
Hi, thank you so much for having me. Happy holidays.
Happy holidays to you too, Vanessa. I'm so honored to have you on the show. I feel like I grew up watching you between Weird Science, Kingpin, Californication, Entourage. I mean, I could just go down the list. Your resume is outstanding. So many memorable performances. We've ran in some mutual circles, and we've gotten to know each other a bit at some parties. And you're someone who's always working. I always see you on a new movie set. You've got, I think, 3 things coming out in the next couple months. And the big thing right now is you're starring in a holiday movie, Merry Xmas, that's on all digital platforms.
I am. And yeah, I actually have been working more than I ever have in the last 2 years, which is sort of unexpected. And I think it's actually partly because I finally kind of crossed over to being able to play my age. You know, you sort of get stuck in that in-between zone sometimes, you know, from the sort of younger parts that you played, and then you sort of mature and you have, you know, people have to sort of embrace you as you are today. And so I've actually been able to play a lot more complex, interesting characters than I ever have. So it's actually quite a wonderful time in my career.
Oh, I'm so happy to hear that, because I always feel like you've been on TV. You've been modeling since you were a teenager, and then you were discovered by John Landis. You played off Chevy Chase, Dan Aykroyd in Spies Like Us, of course.
Yeah.
I grew up in the 90s, elementary school, middle school. The Farrelly Brothers was a big part of my childhood as well, too. I mean, from Dumber to Kingpin, where you come in, and then Something About Mary. Kingpin was always, it was one of those movies that was always on TV. Like the raunchy humor, which of course, you know, if you were in elementary school and middle school, I mean, that was one of those things everyone in class was talking about. And you had to know what that movie was to be cool and have join the conversation.
Yeah. But I actually don't think that some of that sort of gross out humor would probably fly today. You know, there was something nice about the 90s. It was a little more sort of free. But yeah, I mean, it's kind of weird because actually, you know, Kingpin was the Farrelly Brothers' second movie after Dumb and Dumber, and it didn't really do that well in the theaters when it first came out. And I think people kind of discovered it a little bit later. And then when they did There's Something About Mary, which is the movie after Kingpin, and everybody, you know, loved that. So then they kind of looked at what their past movies were, and they sort of discovered Kingpin. So it became this sort of, I mean, it's literally like a cult classic now, which is so amazing, because you don't really, you know, when you're making a movie, you don't really know how it's going to turn out or what its life is going to be. So it's such a thrill to be a part of a movie like that. And I literally go to conventions for nostalgia several times a year. And it's just incredible, like all over the country, how many people just love it. And you know, it obviously makes me feel really good that it's still being watched and still being appreciated.
Oh, absolutely. Because I mean, I actually rewatched it recently, and it's funny when when you rewatch something that's part of your childhood. I remember seeing the trailer. I was a kid. You know, at the time, it was, the guys who did Dumb and Dumber, and we probably saw that like 3 times in the theater. I'm like, oh, great! I can't wait to see this. And there were a few scenes where Woody's character goes wrong that they had that in the trailer, and I just remember it scared me so much.
Really?
Oh yeah, the hustle gone wrong. I remember
with the hand,
the hustle gone wrong was in the trailer, and it scared me. And then I think a year later, it was on TV, and everyone in school was talking about it, and they were saying, "Oh," and so we watched it. Then it was like I got all the gags and the humor. And by the way, everyone in my class was in love with you, so it was like, So again, I do always remember there were those heartwarming parts about the movie, and then rewatching it and again, Woody Harrelson's demise, and then you see where he ends up. It's still, I mean, even just after having your own personal experiences, having friends who have either, taken a sour route in life, and I feel like, because you watch a lot, and just even a lot of movies, I think the last 20 years haven't had the real soul of a lot of 90s movies or a lot of the same heart. And you really, really rewatching Kingpin again, you really see where your character was, where Woody's character was, where Randy's, and of course, Bill Murray was like, he is so unlikable, but for some reason, he still kind of steals the show, and you're not rooting for him at all. But
you can't help but kind of like him, even though he's just this despicable character. I think that's what, like you said, exactly, that's what made the movie so memorable, I think, because even though it was sort of really silly and over the top at times and gross out humor, there was a lot of heart, and these characters were all sort of struggling and going through their own journey. And you saw a sort of, you kind of saw that journey throughout the movie. And I think that it was very relatable, and Woody's character particularly was so relatable, because everyone, like you said, has had, hard periods in their life, or have friends who are going through, difficult times. And it's hard. It was hard not to kind of have empathy for him and what he was going through, and that, the sort of ending is, like sort of ended on a bright note. And I think that's what made it a little bit different than a lot of, broad comedies.
Exactly. And there was that one moment, I think specifically, where the Stanley character comes in, assaults Woody. This is after, there's that whole thing about how you were throwing Stanley off your trail and acting. Right. But when he comes to that realization where he was all those years was blaming Bill Murray, who was responsible for that incident in the 70s, he really comes, it's that moment where he says, you blame other people for screwing things up, but you really look inside and have to take responsibility for your own mistakes. And I felt like all of your characters, I mean, that line in that moment in itself, and what I think could be a tragedy, it really, the way that UTK, and it wasn't like, oh, he won the tournament. I mean, this is like a 25-year later spoiler alert, and for anyone who hadn't seen it, but it's one of those things where it's how you two came together in the end and saved the farm and saved the land for Randy.
Exactly. And isn't that like a life lesson? It's like taking accountability and responsibility for your part in something. And sometimes you can't see that. So I think that the characters all kind of have their awakening moment and change. So that's the beauty of it. I think that's, like I said, why people relate to Kingpin on not just the sort of silly, escapism level. Yeah.
Definitely. No,
we're doing a sequel too.
You're doing a sequel?
Yes, it's out there. It's been announced on the internet, so I guess it's out there. But Peter Farrelly wrote the script, and it was actually supposed to shoot this summer, but it's Sony, and I think Sony had, I don't know what, there's some issues with scheduling or something. So, but it's written, and my character is very much in it, but I haven't read it yet, but I have communicated with Peter Farrelly about it. So apparently it is going to happen. I'm just not sure exactly when, which is kind of weird, like 25 years later to do a sequel. It's kind of, I mean, I guess Dumb and Dumber sequel was about 20 years after the fact.
It was exactly 20 years. Yeah, wow, that would be great if they
This is even longer, so it's going to be interesting.
Yeah, no, I'm really excited for that, and excited for you. You've said like the last few years have really been the most meaningful for you, or the most productive. So I'm so pumped for you.
Thank you. Yeah. I mean, the last 4 years has been really interesting. Not that I want to talk about my personal life, but I had a big change in my personal life, and I had to sort of readjust to life, and to life in the new way that it was for me. And, I wanted to sort of put my energy into my work, and, it's that thing of the law of attraction, right? Like you put energy into something and it comes back to you. So I really do feel that I've gotten a chance, like I said earlier, to really play some more complex characters. And this character in Merry Xmas was actually a really great role. I mean, it's a Christmas movie, Christmas movies, are fun and sort of, holiday vibe. But I play this woman who is, you find out at the very beginning of the movie that her husband's left her for a 19-year-old, and they have 3 kids, and she's flying to see her family for Christmas on the East Coast, and she gets stuck in the snowstorm. And so I play this woman who's really kind of starting out with some serious trauma. And then I go to the bar of the hotel and there's a bunch of people all stuck for the same reasons in this snowstorm. And I run into my ex high school sweetheart. And so then it's kind of a rom-com. It's more of a comedy really than a traditional Christmas movie. But yeah, so I got to play the sort of gamut of emotions, crying and laughing and everything in between. So it was really fun. And we shot it in Rhode Island in March, and I hadn't done a Christmas movie before, so it was really fun. So I'm really excited about it, actually.
Oh, I'm so excited. No, I can't wait to see it. So that is definitely on my list when we all get together and get our activities going. And yeah, I mean, I see you, I not only see you at events, I mean, we follow each other on Instagram. You've worked with some friends of mine. I know you're working with Jackie Moore on a new
Oh, I
project.
love Jackie.
Yeah.
Just did a movie, yeah, with literally like a few weeks ago. And oh my gosh, I mean, I know we're gonna be friends for life. I mean, it's, it's so funny how, I mean, to me now at this point of my career, I'm more interested in the experience I have making the movie than, how the movie turns out, because you can only control that to a certain degree. And I've just met some amazing people in the last year on different productions, and Jackie was one of them. And I really do think we're going to be lifelong friends. You just connect with certain people you just sort of gravitate towards, and you just get like really quickly. And yeah, she's lovely. She's lovely.
That's amazing, because I met Jackie at a similar point in my life where, I grew up in the industry. My dad was in music publishing. My mom had worked for Carson and the Beach Boys back in the day.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So, and it's
I didn't know that.
Yeah. So, it's like growing up in LA, you're always kind of around the entertainment and industry. And, so there's I've had different chapters. I did some acting as a kid. Then I was like more behind the camera. I went to college, did communications. And then I got, I went on more of the agency side after college. And then through the agency, I was the person who eventually became my manager. We started producing and making movies together. So there was a time when I was at a crossroads where, and I think the industry was changing a bit, was like, okay, what's the model now? What do we do? And we had some content. So we started going to local film festivals, and that's really how I met Jackie. She had this movie that was incredible. It was called Grief, and I was like, hey, I really dug your performance. And she's someone who we've had a great friendship with. I've had her on twice on this show. And so I know what you mean, where there's that sense of connection with the people that you're working with. I'm really glad to see you two on set together. And then you also have Johnny and Clyde coming out with a Megan Fox and Bai Ling, who I also know.
Yes. Yeah, that was a blast. That was the first movie I did with this production company. And I've since done another movie after the Christmas movie for Lifetime called The Preacher's Wife, where I played a kind of crazy character. Or I guess I should give that away, but she turns out to be a little strange. And I mean, again, it's like I feel like I have this family in Rhode Island that I just adore. I mean, they're, and it literally feel, when you work with mostly the same crew, and I just feel so blessed that I've, that for me, like I said, now is the most important thing, like the people I meet and the connections I make, and just being present in the experience. I think when I was younger, it's kind of overwhelming at times. It's all sort of, new, and you're trying to navigate it all. But now I think I just appreciate it all so much more. So it's actually been a really nice time in my career, even though, usually after 50, it's not the easiest for women, but I'm actually having a really great time with it right now. So hopefully it continues.
Great said. Yeah. Just as far as people say, oh, you have like a certain range to be in movies and your career if you haven't done something at a certain point. But I mean, you started very young, you've had a consistent career. And I mean, you're just defying the odds by saying, look, I'm at this stage in my life playing these characters and I'm working more than ever, and you're the happiest.
Yeah. When I was younger, when I started out, you get a certain amount of opportunities, and I looked a certain way, and because of Spies Like Us, I kind of got a lot of the the pretty sexy girl window dressing kind of parts, and then I got Baywatch and that. So your career sort of almost starts to sort of take a shape based on just what you get offered, and then you sort of get established. And so when I go to these conventions sometimes, and then I was also on a show 20 years ago called Stargate, so I got invited to quite a lot of conventions, this sort of sci-fi stuff. So between nostalgia and sci-fi, I do quite a lot of these. And it's really interesting to hear the feedback from all the different people you meet in the country that I wouldn't normally meet. And a lot of them don't really know that I do stuff now. They sort of associate me with Kingpin and Weird Science and 90s things and Spies Like Us. And so I have to sort of, let them know, well, actually I am, I'm working now too. And I'm doing, I think, more interesting things than I did back in the 90s. I mean, obviously the higher profile things like Kingpin are, going to get more attention because they're, more sort of globally known. But like I said, I just really love the experience of it and the camaraderie of working with actors and directors and writers and DPs And that's what's important to me now. I mean, obviously, if the movie turns out or the TV show turns out really well, then that's an added bonus. But it's more about the people that I'm working with now.
Oh, you said it. And I remember just being younger, and every set's different. I've been fortunate to be like, I've had a very positive experience on set. There are certain elements of the business where, you do deal with different characters, and, a lot of that is life experience, something behind the scenes going on that I find out later. I'm like, oh my gosh, I had no idea this person had an agenda, or, you're just being in the industry, what happens.
Yes.
Yeah.
I mean, I remember my days on Weird Science, and I was so young and I was just so eager to please. And, now I look back and sometimes I kind of, wish I'd been a little bit more mature at that point, because I think I would have, dealt with some sort of behind the scenes stuff a little bit differently. But, that's what growing and evolving is about, right? You just sort of, you learn and you mature, and that's the beauty of, obviously it's hard getting older, because I want to see my 30-year-old face on screen, not my 50s.
You haven't aged a day. What are you talking about?
But I'm so happy. I'm happy to be able to handle it all better now.
Yes.
I think that's the beauty of getting older.
I can totally agree with you. And I know, there's just moments when I can sit here and beat myself up over just, I look at like the teenage version of myself. Oh, if only I'd known this, or can see through this, but it's because we didn't know those things. Or I was just talking to a friend recently about, when I started in the agency world, which was, and we'll get to, because I know you were on Entourage, but I remember when Entourage was at the peak of its popularity, and like everyone that I was working with, they were all aspiring to be Ari Gold. And like a lot of those, like that was
yes.
it. Exactly. I can remember that time. It was like everyone wanted to, like, that was their thing. They wanted their lives to be Entourage, and they all wanted to be Ari. And he was like, oh, they ever wanted to be the guy in charge. Certain things have been exposed, and we're having the discussions that I think should have been. But I remember just being kind of young, and it was like swimming with sharks, where you're kind of told you're nothing and you have to obey the boss. And this is if you want to make it in this town. I just remember being like, in my early 20s, and certain people, they weren't as strong, and they went and did other, they took other career paths. They're doing great, but again, I'm glad that there's been a lot of changes within the industry. Speaking of Entourage, and I remember that episode that you did, and you were playing yourself.
Yeah, well, the funny, there's a little kind of story behind Entourage, because I had actually worked with Doug Ellen, who's the show creator, on his second movie called Kissing a Fool, in 1997.
David Jason Lee, right? Yeah, I remember.
With Jason Lee and David Schwimmer. And so I met Doug then, and then and then we sort of remained friends, and he's a great guy. And then I got Stargate, and I started to get invited to Comic-Cons. And so I was telling Doug about like some of the funny experiences of my first, my first experience at doing Comic-Cons, because you do these panels and you get asked a lot of questions by fans, and they're like diehard fans, and they know more details about the show than you do. Yeah. So I was telling Doug, and so they were doing the show about the San Diego Comic-Con, and he's like, so it was his idea to bring me on as myself, and with this sort of sci-fi connection, and so a lot of that was kind of based on real life experiences. So it was kind of a mixture of my real experience, and then him just sort of like being creative with with the writing. So yeah, it was such a blast. And that show is so good. It still holds up, and I think it's just one of those industry inside shows that just will always stand out.
Exactly. And because that was at a time too, and I felt like kind of coming out of the 90s, it was, and then it was like more reality television was really taking over in the early 2000s.
Yes, right. Yeah.
And it was shows like Entourage and Californication. And then when you start going into the industry, it was really those shows that were kind of the insider's look with 30 Rock, and you were getting, that's what I mean, like through all these wink, we kind of, that's what I loved about, your characters, and just the stuff that they did on Entourage. And it was because I started actually working at WME, right? It was right during the merger. And so there was the episodes were talking about the merger, right? As like and I'm like, oh my gosh, this is like, my life is like being shown on the stuff that's happening. And then,
because Ari Gold was I think was based on Ari Emanuel, right?
It was Ari Emanuel. Oh yeah.
Yeah. And I was actually in the late 90s, right after Kingpin, I was with CAA, and thrown in the sort of Shark Tank. They were great. There's definitely, great benefits to being with those big high-powered agencies. But yeah, I was, I look back on the 90s now and I think, gosh, I was so naive, I was so naive. But
we can all look
it's
back on
part
those
of,
times. Yeah, it's part of the journey. It's part of growing up.
Yeah.
And like you said, look at where you are now. You're like you're working more than you ever did. It's like age is just a number. It's like, who's to say that you have this certain amount of time? I mean, you're the proof that you're saying, hey, I went through something in my life, and this is what the journey that I'm on. And so no, that's awesome. I'm so happy for you, Vanessa.
Thank you.
I've loved getting to know you a bit more through our mutual friends, seeing you on set with other people I work with. I'm so happy that you have 3 new projects coming out in the next couple of months. Is there anything that you want to shout out to your fans?
Oh, just, check out Merry Xmas. It's streaming right now, and then look out for Johnny and Clyde with Megan Fox and a great cast in January. And then, those are the 2 things that are coming up. And then I have a few movies coming out in the spring and summer, The Preacher's Wife, and something called Deadly Games. So, yeah.
Vanessa, it's always I'm glad that we finally got to do this. Please, you have an open invite anytime you want to come back, talk about.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. It was lovely chatting with you. You're amazing. I've really appreciated getting to know you at the events that we've seen each other at. So
absolutely, it's only the beginning. Please, everyone, give it up for the great Vanessa Angel. You know her from shows like Word Science, Californication, Entourage. She has been in the hit movie Kingpin. You can watch her right now on Merry Xmas. Get into the holiday spirit. It's streaming on all digital platforms. You can catch her in Johnny and Clyde with Megan Fox by Lang, and also in Deadly Games, and she'll be in The Preacher's Wife on Lifetime movies slated for spring 2023. Vanessa, like you said, your career is on fire, and you just keep defying the odds. You keep rocking and rolling, and you're the proof and the inspiration. And just, I'm so happy for you at this stage.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Endeavors.
You made my day. Thank you so much.
And you made mine. So keep rocking and rolling. You enjoy the holiday season.
Thank you. You too. All right. Lots of love. Bye.